parents to thank who they couldn't be here today, but I have them to thank for teaching me about Jesus since I was a very young child. I learned about how each one of us are fearfully and wonderfully created by God who loves us. I learned about how we've all sinned against God, we've fallen short of His glory, we've gone our own way, and we are all in need of His grace and forgiveness. I learned about how He sent His own Son, Jesus Christ, to the earth to live a perfect life and die for our sins, our trespasses, our guilt and shame. After He was buried, for 3 days God raised Him from the dead, and He is alive today, giving us our hope and future if we believe in and follow Him. Around the age of 8, I asked Jesus into my heart to forgive me of my sins, but it wasn't until my teenage years that I really started to grow in my relationship with God and kind of develop a heart for missions. Aside from hearing about missionaries in church, my first memorable exposure to missions was when the movie End of the Spear came out, which was about the 5 missionaries in Ecuador who were slain by the native tribes there as they were trying to go spread the gospel there and tell them about Jesus. That movie impacted me, that story, not just the movie, but their story of how they were willing to die for their faith and that their families would go back to those same people and share, even though those people had killed their families. That made a huge impact on me because it was like, if the gospel is worth dying for, and if it's that impactful that changed you to go on and share, that's what hit my heart. Sorry, I'm a little emotional because this is something that means a lot to me that I'm passionate about. My brother and Stephen and my sister Grace, who's also here, were part of the youth group for several years, and I have so many great memories of being here and involved in ministry, of going over to the Snaveleys, and one of my favorite memories is a Christmas where we went to Shorty Dunn's house. A lot of you probably remember Shorty, and we just sang Christmas carols the whole evening, and it was really wonderful. So I have a lot of memories here, and as a 16-year-old, as a 16-year-old, I stood in this exact same spot, challenged by Pastor Eric to do hard things and to get out of my comfort zone and to talk about my call to missions. I don't know if anyone even remembers that, but I was standing up here wobbling like a bowl of Jell-O, and here I am again. So thanks for listening, and thank you for pouring into my life, not lives. That same summer, that same summer when I was 16, my family started going to Open Door Bible Church, which is where I met Ben in the youth group, and his father was the youth pastor at the time. So it's just kind of funny how everything worked out. That fall, I started taking classes at the local community college in Lee Summit, and I joined a Bible study, just kind of out of the blue, got an invite, and joined a Bible study where Mr. Frank Drown was the guest speaker. And if you've heard that name before, Mr. Drown was one of the missionaries who discovered the bodies of the slain missionaries in Ecuador when it happened. So I was like, whoa, I got to meet him, hear his story, and then when we went to Open Door Bible Church, I found out that he and his wife Marie attended that church. So I got to know them, and I was able to be discipled by Marie for a whole summer after I finished college. So that was it was like all these little things that God kind of put in my life to kind of confirm my path along the way. Another significant experience in regards to my missions calling was when I took a cross-cultural communications class at Prairie University in Alberta. During that year, I had to study the life of a missionary and write a paper, and I chose the life of Jackie Pullinger, who was from the UK, and she left the UK to go to Hong Kong to minister to drug addicts in the walled city of Kowloon many years ago. A quote from one of her books, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that a church leader spoke to her before she ventured to Hong Kong. He said, "If you don't know where God's calling you to, just buy a ticket on the longest boat ride you can find and pray that you know where to get off." And that quote kind of stuck with me because I sometimes feel like I'm on the boat and I don't know quite where I'm going or I'm supposed to get off. And that's kind of been our journey through our missions and my whole life, actually. But that's been my prayers, that God will just lead and guide until I know where to get off, where to go. On my first overseas missions trip in 2016, I went to the Philippines to work with an orphanage and take food into villages and little small communities. And I met someone from Hong Kong, which coincidentally I had made plans that year to go to Hong Kong to visit my dad's family. And while I was there in Hong Kong, I got to go to Miss Jackie's church and hear her speak. And I got to have lunch with a bunch of the people from her church, which was a really incredible experience and an encouragement. So all that being said, my story took a bit of a detour from the things of God when I reached my early 20s. I spent several years living outside the will of God. I made a lot of selfish decisions, and I lived for myself. And although God kept calling me back, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I had so much shame and guilt. And I reached a point when my sister was in the hospital where I came to the conclusion, once again, that life must not be worth living unless there's hope. And that hope is only found in Christ. Because without him, my shame and my guilt had nearly consumed the choices that I made when I was doing my own thing, living for myself, and going my own way. And I came to the conclusion, after a lot of prayer, and seeking and searching and crying and being a complete emotional mess, I came to the conclusion that from that point on, it had to be following Christ or nothing. Because I don't like doing something part of the way, it has to be all or nothing. So I reached that point again in my life where it had to be all or nothing, and I decided I will follow Jesus. No turning back. That summer, it was 2017, I took a trip to Japan, and I was baptized in Japan. And the following year, Ben and I got married, and we just celebrated 3 years earlier this month. But after we got married, so life kind of took this crazy downward spiral, and then my life turned around when I decided to follow Christ again. And since then, Ben and I took a vision trip to Southeast Asia in 2019, which is the trip that we spoke with Pastor Eric about when he came over, and we got to tell him what we did, what we saw. What we did is we went to Southeast Asia and visited several different spots where there is a huge need for refugees to hear about Jesus. These are people who've been displaced from their home country, who don't have hope, who don't have any knowledge of Christ. Many of them have never, ever heard the name of Jesus, much less what he's done already for them. And they're also trapped in their guilt and their shame, just like I was. We applied for the missions organization after that, and last summer we were appointed as long-term workers to Southeast Asia. So right now we're trusting that God will provide so that we can depart when the time is right. But all that being said, trusting Jesus is not always easy. As much as we'd like to believe that, and as much as we'd like to kind of paint that glossy picture like Jesus is enough and he's perfect and it's all great, life isn't always easy. I have suffered from and I'm recovering from postpartum depression, and that's been a struggle, but Jesus is enough on my worst days. I do have fears about raising our daughter overseas and learning the new culture and language. But through all of this, I have peace from God, because he is the one who holds my life in his hands and the life of the ones that I love. And he's the one who's provided and made a way all this way, like my whole life up until now. And I can just hope that my story encourages you, because God has brought me out of darkness into light, and he has called me to live for him. And although it's not easy to stand up here, I'm kind of shaking a little bit, this is what God has called each of us to know him, to follow him, and to share about him with others. Ben and I hope to go to Southeast Asia to do that, but even here we have a responsibility to do that as well. In closing, sorry, I'm looking down, so I remember what I was going to say. Our God is a God who redeems, who brings beauty from the ashes and restoration from brokenness. So he is the way and the truth and the life, and he is our peace. His will is for all to hear the good news, but we have to be willing to follow and willing to go where he leads us. Thank you.
So actually, the end of the spear had an opposite effect for me. When I was a early teen, I didn't want my head chopped off, and I was like, forget missions, God, I'm not doing that. And so I ran from that for a long time, but I could tell that that's what God wanted me to do. So I would say that my life, if it was a degree, college degree, I probably majored in stubbornness and minored in defiance. And so, but thankfully God changed my heart and directed me to missions again. So I had PowerPoint, and I forgot that. And along with that, I also found out I forgot my wallet. But I did not forget calling or where we're going. So I'm glad God doesn't forget about us. So I'd like to share with you what we will be doing there. And I will. I'd still like to share with you some fun facts. We're in a red zone, and so I couldn't share with you some cool facts specifically about a country, but the country we'll call Malacca Mosaic, and the organization I'll just call it EL for you. But a fun fact about Southeast Asia in general is there's this fruit called the durian, and it's good size like a watermelon, and it has spike balls, like spikes all around it. And it's called the world's smelliest fruit. It's also the world's largest fruit. And so this is a common, famous thing around Southeast Asia. And we tried it. So we tried it, and we didn't know what we were having at first. All right. You're right, that was a tough act to follow. But, so we were visiting with some locals, and they were taking us around to a night market, and they gave us some ice cream. And so this is 3-scoop ice cream in this cup. So we're eating it, top one, okay, peach, which was great. Next one, I think it was like melon. And then, third bite, there's something, I knew I tasted it before. I didn't know what it was. I was like, it has like an onion flavor to it. And so I'm like, is there like onion ice cream in this? And the locals are looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then come to find out we had the actual fruit, but my experience and other blogs and people that I read said that there's an onion flavor to this durian fruit. So there's a fun fact for you. I would want you all to try it though. You don't hate it till you try it. It's an interesting experience, but anyway, I'll leave that with you guys. The second one, I want to share some of the majority religions that are there that we'll be working with. And the main one is Islam. That's the majority in Southeast Asia, along with Buddhism and Hinduism and Sikhism. And those are like four prominent ones. There's also Chinese folk religion, and there's a small percentage which is Christian. And Southeast Asia and Malacca Mosaic in particular is, I would say, an emerging market, one for business and two in demographics. So that just makes it a perfect area to make a stand for the gospel, because populations are diminishing in other places like Europe and stuff, but here it's growing more and more there in Southeast Asia, and also the refugee population is growing immensely. And the refugee population is who we desire to reach out to here in Malacca Mosaic and at EL. And what we'll be working with is 19 different nationalities and many different religions. So there's people from Myanmar, from Indonesia, from Pakistani, from Rohingyas, and a lot of them come to Malacca Mosaic because of military and of political turmoil. So I don't know if you've heard or read the stuff going on in Myanmar right now, and just the military took over and people are trying to escape. And so these are the type of people that we want to help. And we want to do it partnering with EL, which is an organization who's actually a self-proclaimed Christian organization in the company, which is surprising. And when we visited there, we really liked it because their mission was very personal and practical in its execution. And their mission statement is fourfold. I want to share that with you guys. It's to rescue the marginalized and homeless, cheated, and those who are in danger of being trafficked and enslaved. So according to the birth registration policies there, 500,000 individuals are stateless, and that means that they're unable to get help from the government. So this increases their vulnerability to be exploited and be trafficked and stuff. And so EL wants to help these people. And they also seek to relieve those who are suffering and who are deprived and sick. And I'll tell you how they do that in a bit. But they also want to restore those who are traumatized to holistic physical, mental, and spiritual health, and to rehabilitate those in need of education and livelihood skills, and get them back into a good social life and renewed dignity by providing them with jobs and skills and stuff. So EL and what we desire to work, they fulfill this mission in 4 different areas, and they do this through healthcare. And they have a mobile clinic that drives around to different communities that don't have access to healthcare. And there's 20 volunteer doctors who actually come and help, and they reach over 1,600 people and assist them each year. And they also do prenatal care and help pregnant mothers. So that's a really good ministry for them. And their largest ministry is education, which takes up 70% of their resources. And actually their curriculum and their teaching is so good that many leaders in different communities, like the Rohingyas, actually invited them to come teach in their madrasas. Madrasas being the religious schools for the Quran. So they just have their foothold in many places. And among those subjects that they teach would be English, mathematics, science, morals, music, art, and something that it would be great if they taught it here in the States too, but they made a curriculum that focuses on life skills, including health, career, critical thinking, and worldviews. So I'm excited to be part of that and help those people. They also provide skill training, and they teach students who are too old to be in the school system, so you'd be like 17 and 18-year-olds sitting in a kindergarten class. Just doesn't quite work out that way. So they teach them skills such as baking and cooking and sewing, and then they provide them jobs through social enterprise. And they have a baking center and sewing center, which they make clothes. And during the pandemic, the sewing center actually made masks and they distributed that to people. So that was a cool thing. And along those lines, they also do urban farming and aquaponics. And that enterprise actually provides a lot of the food for the school. And they told us the fact that each day they make about 50 pounds of rice for lunch every day. So we buy 50-pound bags of rice, and it takes us months. Months of eating. So that was a cool, crazy fact. But, so we desire to partner in wherever they need us there. We have a heart for all of those areas. We've dabbled in EMT work and trying for medical school and just helping people in critical thinking and worldview. So we're excited for that. But that's the compassion side of things. And their mission is to restore them mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that's also our mission too while we're there. And when people, say especially there, when they struggle with physical trauma and stuff, they would, turn to family or drugs or going to temples to offer sacrifices to their gods. And so there is a big spiritual need there in restoring. I'd like to share an example. EL is located kind of right in the middle of a little India town. And a neighboring area to that is a little Chinatown. So it's a very diverse population with 19 nationalities, of course. And walking down the street, and you'll be a Hindu temple, and next to it a Sikh temple, and you can see a mosque right there on the corner. It's just a diverse and different religions there. There's even a little Baptist church there among the mix, and it's quite interesting. But walking around there, it reminded me of Paul, and he was in Athens waiting for Timothy and Silas to come to him in Acts 17. And I wanted to read that to you and share, because this will give you kind of an image of what we will be seeing and working around every day over there. And so I wanted to read Acts 17, 16, 32. So now while Paul was waiting for Timothy and Silas at Athens, the Spirit was being provoked within him as he was observing the city full of idols. So he was reasoning in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be present. And also some of the Epicureans and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, "What would this idle babbler what wish to say?" Others, he seems to be a proclaimer of the strange deities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is, which you are proclaiming? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. So we want to know what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. And this is a cool message that Paul preaches to them. So Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I observe that you are very religious in all respects. And while I was passing through and examining all the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all the things in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. And he made from one man every nation and mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God, that perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and exist, as even some of your own poets have said, for he also are his children. Being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and thought of man. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. So, that's the message that we want to preach to these people. There's a God that they don't know. They worship many gods in ignorance of knowing the one true God. And that's our desire to meet these people in their needs and through compassion service, but also spiritually, because you can't be a holistic being, mentally, physically, and spiritually, unless you have the one true way, Jesus. And it's this unknown God that they need to hear about. And so that's our desire, to meet them, their physical, mental needs through compassion ministries, and their spiritual needs by telling them the good news. So, we hope to be there soon. Our desire is to be there by the end, or have the ability to go there by the end of the year. Currently, we are still fundraising. We are at 24%, so praise the Lord for that. And we would like to be like 60% by the end of summer because we have more training to do. And that's where we're at for now. And so we appreciate your support for prayer, and with many different religions and belief systems, we'll have our work cut out for us. And with 19 different nationalities, there's, let's see here, each children who's there at the school can speak 8 or 9 different languages, and not being English is one of them. So we have our work cut out for us, so we really need prayer in those regards. But we also appreciate you coming alongside us for support monthly too, and help us reach that 60% by the end of the summer. And we look forward to what the Lord has for us in the near future. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to share.